Okay guys, well we've made it. We made it to the end of the course. I might add more content as time goes on, but let's have a look at what we've done. So we've got our test gRPC services. So if you guys in the future need to run something that's gRPC related, you can just fire up our coffee tests and just fire in a new gRPC service, or just use existing ones to do your own tests in the future. And then we covered the theory behind particularly smoke testing, because I wanted to ensure that we had a framework that would test our gRPC services anytime we wanted. And we talked about reliability, repeatability, and confidence in our software. Regression was also important because we definitely don't want our software to regress. It's not good for business. And then we also talked about separation of concerns. So say for instance you have two teams, we want to be able to do our bit of work and pass it on to someone else with the confidence that our system works. Okay, and then we moved on to the different types of K6 tests that you can have, such as smoke test, soak test, load test, and spike test. And they're all basically very similar, except they have different loads that you put in at different time periods. And then we noticed that we were getting connection errors coming through from a gRPC service. So we wanted to normalize our statistics to find out where the actual errors were. So this is where we introduced the try-catch around the connection, and even I think the invocation at this stage. We might have done the invocation later, but I remember it being at this stage. And then we moved on to do response and assertions. So our response and assertions are are basically what. And then we moved on to do response and assertions, and we took a deep dive into the response of our gRPC service, and that's important that we understand all the different parts that make up the response, such as the error, the headers, and the main body itself, and what object we're expecting to be returned. So we now know how to do this in every case. So we just do a console log and output the results from that. Then we were adding assertions, and we used two different ways to do that. We used the describe object and the check object. So we now know how to check the results that come back from a gRPC services based on the response object, and we now know how to get all the information that we need, that is provided by K6 through the response object. Okay, God, there's quite a lot here actually when we think about it. So then we moved on to creating multiple smoke tests and sort of gathering them all into one file and creating a smoke test framework. And the reason why we wanted to do this is, say we had, I don't know, 20 or 30 gRPC services. We wanted one command that we could use in a repeatable way to test that our gRPC services were working as we expect them to. And we sort of developed this framework, and we reused as much code as we could. We even included negative tests in amongst this as well, so that you would want to run a negative test against your service. You expect it to fail, but you pass that test as a successful test, because that's what you wanted to do. You wanted the test to fail, but you wanted it to pass as well. Okay, and then we talked about the rarer types in protobuf, such as the any type and the one-off types. So I discussed how to handle those sort of types, and then also in this stage I also talk about handling or introducing data-driven tests into our framework. So we can run the same test again and again and again. All we do is we pass in a JSON array, and inside that JSON array will be the different arguments that we'll send into the test. And the number of items in that array will dictate how many times that test is run. Okay, and then we moved on to automation. So basically using Jenkins to run our test on a schedule, or if we fire it. And then we also looked at a Kubernetes job, and also briefly how to create a Kubernetes cron job, so that we don't actually need to run these. They could run at night, or they could run anytime we wanted, just after release. So if you were to use Jenkins to do a deployment, you could then you could run these tests straight after. And then we moved on from that, and we moved on to staged calls and sharing session data across calls. So this would include stuff that you might, some data that you might not have. So this would include data that you might not have, and the reason for that this is a great idea is you can call the first service, get the data that you do need for the second service, hold it in session, and then pass it down into the next stage. So we talk about that's that type of test. We also talk about integrating it into a framework, because we just want to keep on building on the different types of tests that we want to add to our framework. And then we talk about making our course as our then we talk about making our framework as rock solid as we can. And one of the ways that we did this is we spoke about one connection per user versus one connection over all users, and then we talk about adding more error handling in, and then we talk about adding dynamic arguments into our protobuf. So when it comes, so if you had a test and you wanted another JSON object to pick at random any one of the values from a JSON object, it would just go and get that at random. And then we talk about aborting on when abort. And then we talk about aborting on complete failure. So these are the sort of things that we want to sort of talk about when you're building your framework and building gRPC services, and also in particular when you're running tests under load. So say you've got 3,000 users, this is the sort of type of stuff that you want, and there's additional catches that you need to do for gRPC services that you wouldn't have to do in an ordinary K6 test. So we explore these special cases in this section here, and then we talk briefly about the life cycle as well, and then that sort of wraps up the course. But I certainly enjoyed writing this course, and I hope you enjoy using this course to polish up your skills using K6. Okay. Bye for now.